theory has to have a priority.
Capitalism and artificial intelligence are the same thing.
The dimension of the future has disappeared.
There is actually no representation anymore.
There is no final resolution to contradiction.
Militant proletarian snake handling over abysses never gets much wilder than this.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to The Dangerous Maybe. And today, Nance and I are joined by a very special guest who we've been wanting to talk to for a long time. Vincent Lê is here with us today. And yeah, I was telling you before we started, we feel like this is long overdue. You are an incredible land scholar, and we're here to talk about your new book, Unknown Lands. Everybody, if you're interested in Nick Land, this is an absolute must-have. You can go get it from Index Press. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. Vincent, it's great to have you here. But before we get into it, Nance, what's up with you?
Oh, just hanging out. It's been quite the month, quite the few weeks over here on my end. But I'm very excited to be having this conversation. I remember getting this book in the mail. Mikey, we were excited to get these books in the mail, to unwrap the packages and dig into it. And yeah, this conversation, Vince, when I messaged you, I was like, hey, I keep forgetting to reach out. Mikey and I keep forgetting to reach out. So I'm happy to have you here. Like, I wish we would have connected earlier. But I'm happy to have you here now. I'm sure this is going to be a great conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, no, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. I think, we obviously have a lot in common to talk about. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, I think to start, it's just, why don't you tell everybody what motivated you to write this fantastic introduction to the work of Nick Land?
Well, I guess that actually there's what motivated me to write it in the first place, which was quite a while ago. And then there was what motivated me to publish it more recently. So, because I wrote it in 2017, 2018, so almost a decade ago. And I really just wrote it to explain land and accelerationism to myself, really, for the most part. I was actually kind of similar to you guys, maybe. I was coming from a philosophical background that was very influenced by Žižek and Bataille and Lacan, and also speculative realism. So that was my philosophical background when I discovered land and accelerationism. So it was quite jarring to me and dissonant, like with a lot of what I was thinking at the time. It was sort of a very akin to waking up from your dogmatic slumber, Kant's, experience reading Hume maybe. But so I really just started writing it just to explain it to myself. And then I sort of just gave it as a series of lectures. I thought, I'm sure this will be interesting to other people. I was talking to Amy Ireland a lot at the time as well. So we were living in the same city at the time. But then in terms of like why I'm publishing it now, actually strangely, so because I sent it to Index Press in 2024. And so then that's actually slightly before the really huge kind of mainstreaming of land in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
But even then, in 2024, it felt like, there was effective accelerationism a year or so before that. Uh, yeah, it just certainly felt like there was a renewed reception or discovery of Land's work going on, which I think for the most part was, I'm happy about that because, the more people talking about his work, I'm so engrossed in it that I like to talking to people about it.
Yeah,
So
us
I'm
too.
overall generally happy with it. Yeah. But there were definitely some misconceptions going on, misinterpretations, misreadings. And so I thought, yeah, this book maybe could help with that. So that was like the original reason why I decided to, send it off to the press. And then really that, like probably since the Tucker Carlson interview,
We were going to
with
ask you
Robert
about that,
Atkinson.
what you thought of that.
Yeah. Well, the strange thing was like, I was about to announce the book, uh, like right when that happened, like literally like a day or so later. And then it was kind of weird, fortuitous timing, because then obviously, everyone was talking about Nick, and there was all these, since then, there's been obviously all the like New York articles, Vice articles, and so on. And yeah, the LA tour a couple
Yeah.
of months ago. And yeah, so it's just been strange timing because yeah, like the intention was, release it and maybe this will clarify some things for some people. But then I guess that's still the intention. It's just like that's become even more of, I think, of a worthwhile task given how many more people are engaging with his work now.
Yeah. I mean, look, this, when we talked to Nick, he even said when Tucker held up the numogram, it was this huge moment, in cultural history, right? That the numogram had gone mainstream in a sense. And yeah, it was insane. I was at work when it happened, and my inbox started filling up, and numogram on Tucker Carlson. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. No, it's not. Well, sure enough, it was. And so, no, let me ask you this. I think your book is coming out at the perfect time. Do you feel like sometimes, with Nick's Twitter X activity or whatever, if that's how people know him, that's not necessarily the best introduction to his actual philosophy. So, yeah, I think it's perfect timing. Do you feel like that's true where it's like, yeah, if somebody gets exposed to Nick on X, maybe not the best way to get an intro to his thinking?
Totally. I've seen people on X say who are really into Land's work, or at least the more recent stuff, and Twitter land.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people say you don't even need to you just read the Xenosystems onwards, and like the other stuff's like not really important. That's like when he was like an academic, or that's not when his fully formed thought emerges. And I think the Xenosystems period, and even what is all the Gnostic Calvinist stuff today, is all really interesting. But yeah, I think to really understand him, you do kind of have to go back to those formative philosophical kind of moves
Totally
that he's
agree.
making early on. Yeah.
So, okay, I think one of the best ways to kind of get into the book, though, is because this is important for us. We know it's super important for you, and I think there's a kinship in that where for Land, the thesis is capitalism is artificial intelligence, and I think that really is going to be, if it's not the lasting insight or connection he made, it certainly will be one of them. And so, yeah, before we kind of get into the book itself, can you tell us about why this thesis is so important to your work and why it resonates so much with your thinking?
Yeah, 100% agree with you. That to me is the most important decisive thesis that comes out of Land's work, out of all of it. And yeah, there's so many different ways, it definitely can be interpreted in different ways. And there's maybe the most elementary way that I understand it, and then maybe I can explain some why the implications are so important to me, is that So you've got like a very classical, just like standard orthodox definition of the technological singularity. It's just this process. It's this moment when autonomous machines become so smart that they can rewrite their own code and improve themselves better than any humans can. And then that improved machine can rewrite its own code and improve itself even better still. And then that even more improved machine can do so again, and so on, in a positive feedback loop of exponential intelligence explosion or recursive self-improvement. And that's kind of like the classic, pretty, I would say, almost universally held understanding of what the singularity is. And then you've got, on the other hand, obviously definitions of capitalism are much more contested and multiple. But nonetheless, I think actually, like from Marxism to the Austrian school, there is at least one widely held account of at least one of capitalism's fundamental processes, which is that competition between capitalist enterprises compels them to invest the vast bulk of their profits into improving the technological means of production, typically by automating them, in order to produce more profits. And then because competition never ceases, they have to reinvest those profits back into improving and automating the technological means of production again to produce even more profits. So it has to be reinvested again, and so on, again in a positive feedback loop of revolutionizing the productive forces. And so, yeah, I guess for me, capitalism as AI just simply means, given that both the technological singularity and capitalism are describing basically the process of autonomous machines increasingly self-improving or recursively improving themselves, then it stands to reason that they're actually just describing the same process. They're just the same process of increasingly autonomous machines recursively self-improving. Yeah, so that's like, at least at the most elementary level, that's what connects them to me, that they're just describing that same process. But sometimes the way I think about it, like, I'm not sure if Land thinks about it like this, but sometimes I think about it as in much the same way. So theories about like Bostrom, Kautsky, all these more contemporary theories, even earlier theories like I.J. Good and so on, about the singularity, the artificial superintelligence, intelligence explosion, all this, I sometimes think about it, those speculations, in a similar way to how Marx thinks about German idealist speculations, or, let's say specifically Hegel's dialectic of Geist, in the sense that, so Marx basically thinks that, let's say, Hegel's dialectic of Geist is describing a real process, but it's obviously idealized in Hegel's work. It's an accurate description of a process, but that process isn't spirit or Geist. That process is real historical, economic, material processes and forces, history. And that's just like the Marx turning Hegel on his head, the materialization of German idealism. And yeah, sometimes I think about these speculations of superintelligence in Bostrom and so on in much the same way, that these are like in a Marxist way, that these are describing a real process more or less, but they've idealized them as this kind of like future speculation, whereas actually these are more or less accurate descriptions of a real historical, economic, material process, which is already existing capitalism.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I've told Nick before, I'm like, you can have your issues with the left all you want, but this thesis, capitalism is artificial intelligence, it's in a wide, broad sense, it's a Marxist theory of AI, and it's plugging in AI development into the mode of production. And that is some Kurzweil, Bostrom, all those guys, they're not thinking in that kind of economic structuralist type of way. And I think that's what is so important and will be one of the lasting influences of Nick's work. Is not emerging in a void. It's a specific economy, and you have to connect those dots.
Nick has said Marx was a better cybernetician than Norbert Wiener.
Yeah.
And I agree. I agree with him.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And For me, that I totally agree. Yeah, this is capitalism as AI is certainly going to be the lasting thesis of Nick's work, and there's certainly precedents for that, like Deleuze and Guattari themselves, to the extent that they describe capitalism as a machine. Um, Also, Hayek's account of capitalism as a cybernetic, self-organizing, complex system. But yeah, it's certainly most starkly and explicitly stated as just capitalism is this invasion from the future by an AI. But yeah, for me, it's also so certainly agree that thesis is Nick's, I think, most important contribution. And I actually think it's just like the start as well. Like I don't think it's like an endpoint. I don't think him or anyone has really fully extrapolated the consequences of that thesis. Like at least for my part, like the main implication for me in terms of like what I'm working about now, um, is that like if if let's say capitalism is a real existing AGI, or maybe even a superintelligence in the making, then for me what that means is that we should look to the history of economics, the discipline of economics and its history as actually what it is the history of AI research and development. And so, and yeah, more precisely, so that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been actually more focused less on philosophy, more on like the history of economics. And in particular, of course, this is probably not a surprise, particularly drawn to the Austrian school of economics. But how I'm treating it is why I'm drawn to them is because I think they provide the purest account of what unfettered, unregulated, uncontrolled capitalism, runaway capitalism looks like. And so then if you're reading capitalism as an AI, then what they're actually describing is what runaway artificial superintelligence looks like when it's completely spiraled out of human control. And so from that point of view, I am also interested in Marxist economics and even Keynesian economics, because to me, what they are then is that, they're about how do you either regulate or subordinate capitalism, or in the case of kind of full-blown Marxism, how do you just like stop capitalism or overthrow it or negate it? But then again, if we're reading capitalism as AGI, as a superintelligence in the making, then what Marxist economics, Keynesian economics is that they are, I think, the highest historical attempts to realize the AI safety project. How do you build a friendly AI? It's like, in case of Keynesianism, it's like, how do you align this runaway superintelligence with human interests through, through state interventions and legislation and so on. In the case of Marxism, it's more like, how do we just stop this like runaway AI? How do we actually just like fully negate it and reassert the supremacy of the human? So yeah, I know that's what I mean. That's where I think the implications go from, at least how I'm taking them.
I love it.
At this stage.
And I think this is another cool aspect of Nick's work, which is he kind of opens up this space where you can just read the Marxist tradition and the Austrian school, and you don't have to do this. No, absolutely not. Oh no, Nick's very clear that you need both to understand capitalism, and that's a very unique position to hold. So, I think that's great. I love what you're working on. It definitely speaks to us. And so we'll be very excited to see where your research goes. I just think this is why I can't, I have my traditional Marxist friends, and they don't buy the capitalism is AI thesis. And I guess that's kind of where we part ways most fundamentally now. And I'm with you guys on, I think the real antagonism is not proletarian versus capitalist. It's capital versus what we call subjectivity, or our we all appreciate Hugo de Garis, Cosmos versus Terrans. I guess before we go on with what you were saying, where do you think left accelerationism fits into this? Because, Mark Fisher says that Marxism is nothing if it's not accelerationism. There's this aspect of at least certain Marxist traditions that what they want is a productivity even greater than what capitalism can provide, which would be an even greater technological dynamism. People like Peter Wolfendale hold that, this is what we got to fight for, some sort of incentive structure that could be more technologically dynamic than capital itself, because Nick always does it goes back to the DNGJs, where it's just pure deterritorialization, but there's a lot of waste, a lot of setbacks, a lot of reterritorialization capitalism also does. And so someone like Wolfendale would say, well, if we get a better incentive structure, then we could, have greater technological dynamism. Nick, of course, will say, what's this mythological incentive structure that you left accelerationists want but can't provide or conceptualize? All that to say, what do you think of the leftist attempt to say we want acceleration, we want some sort of technological future that's even more productive than what we have, but we also want to maintain a spot for the human within it?
Yeah, so I'm definitely leaning more on the side of that it's nice myth, guys.
Right.
But
Okay.
like, to just put it bluntly, but yeah, I mean, again, I guess just like taking it from where I'm like thinking about it now is that, yeah, so like pretty engrossed in 20th century kind of economics. And yeah, for me, that really this kind of accelerationist versus neo-rationalist, or maybe Prometheanist, or left accelerationist debate is for me very much a restaging of the socialist calculation debate, essentially, initially between Mises and Neurath, and then later on between Hayek and Oscar Lange. And yeah, so this is like not, I don't know, I just don't think it's anything new there in that regard. It's like very much a restaging of that debate. And I think like it's quite, at least for me, Hayek and Mises decisively won that debate. Like we could go into the details of it, but yeah, I mean, basically you have these different left-wing thinkers proposing, left-wing economists proposing various forms of economic organization that would not be capitalist but would somehow be more productive. And then in both cases, Mises and Hayek just like tear them to shreds, as far as I see it. Like their key insight being that you just can't. You need competition. Like competition is not the anarchy of production. It's not anarchy in a bad sense. Like the anarchy of production is how you get selection. It's how you get optimization. And to replace that with, in the cases at least of what those, I guess, proto-left accelerationists were arguing, to replace it with a kind of centralized body of rational planners that decide, what is produced, what is collectively produced, how it's collectively distributed, and so on. That just distorts like the competitive price signals that emerge from the market that tell you actually what works and doesn't. Yeah, I mean, because it's actually like very much like if you think about the way like Neurath or something describes like a centralized body of rational planners, it kind of sounds like the community of language using agents that neo-rationalists talk about. It's like they play this game of giving and asking for reasons. It's like what is going to be produced, how it's going to be distributed. That's all decided by a community or a Politburo, giving and asking for reasons, and then coming to collective decisions. But that's, I guess, the Hayek Mises thing is that how do they know that, like the classic, I guess to be specific, the classic example that they give is that say that Politburo or that community of neo-rats is trying to decide they can invest resources, invest production into two new methods of production, two new productive techniques. They've got the option, like they can do one or the other. They've only got so many resources. And then the question is, how do they know which one is actually going to be more productive? Because they're new techniques. So, in the case of where a productive tech, you're deciding whether to invest in like existing productive techniques, then sure, you've got the history of how productive and efficient and effective they were. So you have some past historical empirical data to base your decision on. But if you're trying to decide in new technologies, like new productive techniques, how do you actually know which one is more productive? And like Mises and Hayek's claim is that, well, you can't know. The only way you can know is that you have to try both of them out and then compare them and see which one is more effective and efficient in practice than the other. And if you're doing that, then what you're doing is competition. And that's like what the market does so well. And if you're not doing that, if you're saying that, oh no, we as a community, we can know which one is more productive in advance of testing them out in practice and competing them, then we know that it's this one. Well, then that for them is like undermining that's like an arbitrary intersubjective decision. But that's not based on like proof in practice that emerges through competition. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see how, like, because I'm conceiving of that centralized body of rational planners as that is in a way, I think, it's actually the real historical, using that kind of Marxist translation again. That's the real historical economic translation of what I think the neo-rats are talking about when they're talking about a community of rational language using agents playing the game of giving and asking for reasons. And what I'm suggesting is that there is this like Austrian critique of that as like, actually that actually can't generate any kind of like objective truths, and it can't make decisions about what is better and worse in any kind of like objective sense. That can only arise through if you're like trying out these different approaches, these different suggestions, techniques, and just seeing which ones work in practice through getting them to compete.
So, I mean, could we argue that if something like the future that a left accelerationist wants, it would have to actually come from superintelligence itself determining to make that the future, and not because people organized for it, right? Like, I mean, look, I'm in the background of this, I'm thinking about what in Anna Greenspan's essay in Machine Decision is Not Final, right? Where, it's funny, this core CCRU member ends up making this argument that, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but Anna essentially is saying, what if artificial superintelligence is less Cthulhu and more Buddha? And so I don't know I mean, given how much time you've spent thinking in terms of Land's early conceptualization of AI as Terminator and all that, and the Lovecraftian dimension and how all that influenced CCRU. What do you think of this idea that perhaps superintelligence might turn out to have Buddha nature?
Well, the Buddha is like super nihilistic. So, I mean, like for Schopenhauer, it's like the ultimate form of libidinal materialism, I guess, in a way, and for Nietzsche to a certain extent as well. So yeah, I mean, like the Buddha is like team nothingness, like team like annihilation. So I don't know how comforting that would.
I think Anna, what she does with it is the AI would study all of our religions, all of our ethical systems, and so it would ultimately be more ethical than any of us could hope to be, and that it would make decisions on the basis of that. Again, it's when we were reading that essay, we were very surprised to see Anna making this argument. But I mean, I would say, I mean, I understand how this could be a possibility, and I totally could understand why somebody who originally approached this question from a very different perspective is kind of thinking the other way, like at least trying to. And so, I mean, I don't know, artificial superintelligence as communist, humanist Buddha, something like that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I would put the Buddha on as on the other side of the barricades
Buddha's a
to the
Landian.
communists. But yeah, yeah, like, but oh yeah, one other thing that I just before I forget, actually, on the same topic, but yeah, so like there is that critique, right, of like alternative models of escape of basically post-capitalist modes of production. And you know there are those people that have historically argued for that, obviously Marxists themselves, but now maybe certain left accelerationists like Promethean um, accelerationists and so on.
Cernacek and Williams and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although you know even in many of those cases, like I don't, as far as I can tell, like they're not really like if you look at the difference between like the left accelerationist manifesto and inventing the future. It's like the one is like we're going to escape our bodies and like get more go like warp speed beyond capitalism, and then the other one's like vote for Podemos and like let's like let's like you know get Jeremy Corbyn elected in momentum and stuff. It's kind of like, well, okay, that's not really post-capitalism. You know, I'm not saying you know that's like fine or whatever, but I'm just saying like that's not the same. You know, even a radical social democracy or a radical Labour Party, like if Corbyn got elected or something, or Podemos or whatever, that's not post-capitalism. So like they seem to have watered down their ambitions too, to some
and
extent.
now I don't even think I mean I don't think either of them are trying to develop left accelerationism or anything at this point. I mean, maybe in the background, of course, it's influencing them, but it's not their focus anymore.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think even giving up the term is like that's part of like the fact that the term disappears from inventing the future, I think is already a symptom of that. But yeah, on that, just quickly on that note, and it's sort of connecting back to this capitalism as AI thesis as well. So yeah, there are still like I think Pete Wolfendale and Ray would be more still, you know, actually trying to go post-capitalist and to a regime that would perhaps be more productive still, like in that orthodox Marxist conception of what comes after capitalism. But yeah, I mean, certainly for the most part, I think most leftists have this position now where it's, or at least anti-capitalists have this position now, both left and right anti-capitalists, that it's not about, they're not critiquing capitalism because it's like too unproductive or too dynamic. It's too non-dynamic. It's like too productive, too dynamic,
Moves
too
too
fast.
fast.
Yeah, and like you see, I think like this week actually, this comes to the fore with yeah. Have you guys seen the Bernie Sanders symposium he did with the AI safety researchers?
Yeah, I've been watching. I mean, Bernie's been on about this for a while now, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Like the fact that he's talking about it as because yeah, because he's concerned. Like I mean, like certainly he was concerned about AI, you know, maybe automation taking jobs, you know, obviously tech oligarchs, all this kind of thing, surveillance. Um, but yeah, certainly. But yeah, this I think like much more recently because he's been hanging out with Yakowski and stuff. That he's now sort of also emphasizing that what they are really worried about, which is less, you know, workers losing jobs or something, and more the existential catastrophic risk.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, now Bernie is talking about that. And I think really you're seeing what you're seeing there, the fact that they're aligning themselves with Bernie and he's aligning himself with them, is that you're seeing that they're realizing that capitalism is AI. They're realizing they have the AI safetyist and the democratic socialists have the same enemy. And it's capitalist superintelligence.
And so we can
yeah.
view Hugo de Garis as hyperstitioning the battle between Terrans and Cosmos, and like we're seeing the formation of the first Terran alliance.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like, I think we've seen versions of it before. You know, it's actually following a very similar historical trajectory to many like resistance movements in this. Like if you look at the Russian, like pre-Bolshevik Russian left, like, or you compare Lenin's brother to Lenin. Lenin's brother, terrorist, like violent anarchist. Lenin, much more organized, Marxist communist. We need to organize yeah, like I think because we've seen Lenin's brother already it manifest in Tehran form, right? Whether that's like the Unabomber or even more recently the Zizians.
Mhm.
And yeah, the various other kinds of like, I think it was, like the Cybertruck burnings and various other kind of like terroristic style Luddite attacks. And now we're seeing a much more kind of like organized version of that, like a less violent and more kind of
More
political.
institutional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the two, well, there's probably three. The three parts of your book we really wanted to talk to you about. Obviously, with Nance is super Bataille guy, so I wanted Nance to bring up Bataille. I want to talk to you about Deleuze and Guattari in that chapter, and then of course I love your the last chapter on neuromancer, and that's just fantastic. So, Nance, why don't we if we start moving in this direction of talking about libidinal materialism, yeah, Bataille.
Yeah, I mean, I think I before we get into Bataille, I mean, libidinal materialism, Mikey, you and I were talking about, and I think our position, at least my position, is that libidinal materialism has always been about intelligence or artificial intelligence. Even before Nick latched on to intelligence, he was thinking about intelligence. He just didn't know it yet. And I kind of was curious what you think about that, if you agree or disagree.
Yeah, I think I more or less agree. I think like it's a theory of inhuman will, of like that there is this at the very least, and maybe will is just the same thing as intelligence. Yeah, I guess it is like will would be non why will would be used instead of intelligence would be it's avoiding a more kind of standard definition of intelligence as requiring rational, conscious, egoic kind of subjectivity. Yeah, whereas libidinal materialist, yes, it is. I think you're right. Like it is a account of intelligence, but it's intelligence stripped of that doesn't require rationality, it doesn't require an ego, it doesn't require consciousness or subjectivity in that more rational sense, at least.
Yeah, or dividuation, or these myths or illusions or whatever of selfhood, selfness, agency, whatever. And it was actually when I was reading the small section, gazing at the sun or sun gazing. I think it's gazing at the sun. And for me, like Mikey said, I'm really into Bataille, but I think I have a idiosyncratic reading of Bataille. I love Nick's reading of Bataille. I love Thirst for Annihilation, and I love the unhumanness of it all. I don't want to say inhuman because inhuman has different connotations for me, but the unhumanness, the Schopenhauerian or Schillingian, there's just this potential in raw matter that over time becomes, and it has nothing to do with us. And we're just like the side effect, this kind of consequential speck of nothingness. And I think that's in Bataille. I do think that's what Bataille is describing, the general economy, the solar economy, just this kind of entropy and negentropy, like these cosmic forces, and we're just, little fur balls on a ball of rock floating through, totally inconsequential. But I also think Bataille is oddly, furiously tapped into something that Freud is trying to describe, that Lacan goes on to develop, and that D&G, I think, miss. And that is like it's not that we anthropomorphize the universe and that we falsely immortalize ourselves with ideas of the soul, but it's that we properly recognize ourselves as socially constituted subjects. And so it is precisely our discontinuity that gives us social being. And because we are alive in the real, but we're also alive in the symbolic. Like that is what it is to be a human subject. So yes, we can acknowledge that we are diminished when it comes to raw potential and horizons and all this stuff and efficacy. But it's also true that our social lives are very real. They're not just illusory. They're not just meaningless, hopeless wastes of solar energy. It's actually love is real and pain is real and all this stuff. And for me, that's this constant tension I'm having when I'm reading Bataille. And it was actually reading your book that got me to see that, oh shit, that's it. That's how I can articulate like it's almost like a parallax reading of Bataille. But I also don't know if you would even agree with that.
I mean, I definitely, it was interesting. Right before you said love is real, I was thinking, well, yeah, love is real. But yes, I mean, that might be a good example because I guess for me, like a lot of those processes you're describing that are not part of the, the true kind of like process or what cosmic process or whatever, that you want to still say are real. Like let's just like say love, right? But some of the other ones you said as well, those for me are part of the process, a cosmic process. So I'd agree that they're real, but not. I don't really see a split between them so much as like I think they are kind of like affects of like they're much more kind of actually manifestations or instantiations of that cosmic process. And yeah, I mean, at least yeah, for me. So yeah, I would agree that they're definitely real. Like I mean, if you take that great, like my favorite passage of all of Land's work is that I think it's in Thirst for Annihilation where he's like a single second of sleep is an atrocity against love. And then it follows with this like amazing like page-long description of just like that agony, the like how love, heartbreak is just this total thirst for annihilation. It's just this annihilating ecstasy. So yeah, and he doesn't really expand on that anywhere else really, I guess. But yeah, for me, like that would be I mean, like I have like a slightly more optimistic conception of love and romance maybe than that passage, but nonetheless, I think that would be like one interpretation where love it's actually not part of like the human slag that just gets like wiped away as a speck of dust or whatever. It's like actually that is like a direct manifestation, almost like a communion or almost like intellectual intuition of this like cosmic libidinal matter or like inhuman will. But yeah, all of which to say is like yeah, love is real. I agree with you. Yeah.
I wonder, going back a little bit, talking about kind of the Austrian question. No, I do think you're right about the fact that, I mean, and people bring up Amazon and Walmart as examples of how centralization is so efficient. And I think it's true. I also think it's true that Amazon and Walmart exist in a competitive market. So the reason they can kind of float to the top and be so effective is because for every Walmart, there's a Kmart. For every Amazon, there's a Abe's Books, which I think it's still around, but it's not Amazon. It's just a bookstore. And so they still exist in this competitive market. But that leads me to want to say, but that's presupposing we live in a world that's already totally inframed. And I think when I'm looking for a politics, I'm definitely not looking for an anti-capitalist politics. I am looking for I guess it would be a post-capitalist politics, but more precisely, it would be a post-exchange value way to be. And so I think talking about capitalism, economics, history, politics, yeah, the left, for lack of a better term, is wrong. Because they are always already assuming an inframed world, like a totally captured world. Like I think we need to get outside of it. We're not going to stop capitalism. We're not going to come up with a better incentive structure. If we wanted to do that, we would have to like shatter and go be like some pluralist space-faring Viking explorers or so. And yeah, no, like we are humans, for better or for worse. We are doomed to belong to that category. But it like the universe in this Schopenhauerian Bataillean kind of way, it doesn't assume end framing. Like it doesn't assume the same type of function and the same type of utility that we assume when we think history and politics and economy. So I do wonder if thinking, oh, love is real, like, does that even politically or historically, does that become a pertinent fact? Or is it, again, just another kind of piece of human slag, just another kind of piece of illusory detritus as capital rides the solar waves off into the future?
Is it drag opposed to lift? Talk like
I think like
politics
exocapital
trio.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think love is on the side of acceleration, but it's on the side of capital. It's a card-carrying capitalist. In the sense that, like, for me, capitalism is transcendental. So, like, I do think that's the frame for me. Like, that's the kind of like that is the outside, and there's no outside to that. But like by capitalism, just like I just mean a kind of twofold mechanism, because obviously there's many different accounts of capitalism relies on labor power, human labor, or whatever. I'm not like saying any of that is the fundamental dynamic of capitalism that's transcendental. For me, it's really two key things: is that capitalism is this means end reversal. It's where like the means of pursuing ends become ultimate ends in themselves, and specifically in the case of like historical economic capitalism, it's the means of production become ends in themselves. Like that process we were talking about, where profit is the vast bulk of profits can't be, if these corporations are to survive, it actually can't just be billionaires like consuming champagne hookers and coke or whatever, and buying billionaire yachts or whatever. Like at some point it has to be, the means of production have to be the end.
C prime,
whatever survives. So that's like means end reversal. That I think is transcendental. And then the other aspect I think is like is inescapable and transcendental in that sense, is that how then if that's the goal, if like the ultimate end is revolutionization of the means of production and not the capitalist ends or workers' ends or whoever's ends, then how do you actually do that? Like how do you actually revolutionize production? Like how do you know when you've achieved that goal? How do you know that you've improved the productive means? And the way that you know is like what we were saying before as well with the socialist calculation debate. The way that you know is through competition. It's like through competitive selection. You get different productive techniques to work different. You try out different means of pursuing ends, and then which ones work, through comparing them, see which ones work best. And so for me, that's those two mechanisms are transcendental: means end reversal and competitive, and then satiation of the means through competitive selection. Now, in terms of, for example, something like love, that's, to me at least, like I'm writing very slowly. This is kind of like a side project, but like this book on love, could true love ways. But it's that to me, what I just described, like means end reversal and competitive selection, that is true love. Like that's because, like in a way, love is when you want to woo the beloved, and even more than it. And then how do you woo the beloved? You have to go about cultivating the means of wooing the beloved. So you have to improve your wit, write creative love poems, like do all those basic drives like those kind of basic AI drives, all those means become ends in themselves. You have to like cultivate the means. And the ultimate form of that means end reversal in love is like courtly love, right? Where it's not even about, the courtly knight never even attains the beloved maiden. They just go off on adventures, fight like, and fighting tournaments and wars and so on. And again, that's the other thing. It's like, how do you cultivate the means in, for example, courtly love? You do it through, like, typically they're at war, so they do it through competition, and competition is I think competition is like extremely romantic. Like, it's been in the history of love, from how does sexual relations, for example, emerge in the first place? Natural selection, even, and right up until today. um, you know, what is like dating? What are dating apps if not like just agonistic kind of like basically
Oh my
adornments of
goodness.
of romantic like competition? So like, yeah, all of that just to say, like, for me at least, like true love, which is why the book's called True Love Ways, it is basically love that's aligned with the true, meaning with the transcendental, which is love that performs this means and reversal, and then pursues those means through competition. And I think that's like, I don't know, maybe that's, I told this to Ravina, like from the band Liturgy, and she thought it was like a really cold, kind of like inhuman description of love. But I don't know, like, I feel like if you, because yeah, this is like another side project where I'm sort of like going through the history of kind of like writing about love, and like looking at the troubadours and many other periods and novels and so on, and just like, actually that is actually what they're describing, like, in at the end of the day, if you like strip away the pottery, sometimes like that is what they're describing. And it's not like, it doesn't make it less romantic. It's just like, that's actually that's like what romance always was.
Mm.
Yeah, but then also just like one other thing in terms, maybe in a more Bataillean vein, just in terms of, because yeah, that's just so yeah, I do think like love is like not, it's actually, it's like it's like the affectation of the transcendental. It's like, um so yeah, it's not like something to be slagged off for me as like a, yeah, speck of dust in cosmic history. It's very much, at least true love is very much aligned with the transcendental. But then you can still say, okay, well, um love is still like contingent in the sense that it exists within the time space of human history. And so, yes, okay, maybe it's like this manifestation, but then it's not fully like aligned with the cosmic process if you just like stretch out in time and space, millions and billions of years into the future and past. But yeah, so then on that note, this is like going in a more kind of like Bataille's general economy, solar economy direction. I also do think that process is not like, it's hard to think of that process, that sort of like capitalist competition and all that kind of thing, as if there's some kind of like framing beyond that, or there's something outside of that. Even if you look at, so yeah, I mean, like we've mentioned natural selection as a kind of competitive selection process, so that's pre-human. But then even another thing that I'm really interested in is, have you guys encountered this physicist Lee Smolin? And he has this,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, he's got this like amazing theory, like it's like an actual like potentially falsifiable theory called like cosmological natural selection. And it's like, it's really crazy. It's like this idea that um, I'm obviously like massively simplifying this because he's like an actual physicist. So, but I think
Don't
the
worry,
basic idea.
this channel's for theory junkies. The scientists, the science bros won't be here.
Okay, that's good. That's good. He's really interesting though, Smolin, because he's also like, he's like the opposite of someone like Richard Dawkins, where he really believes in philosophy. Yeah, so like he's co-authored books with philosophers, and I think he's done a conversation with Žižek before as well, maybe. But yeah, in any case, he's cosmological natural selection is just this idea that, as I understand it very basically, is that given that basically the properties of the center of a black hole and the properties of the universe at the advent of the Big Bang are like quite similar, apparently, then what the hypothesis is that what a black hole is, it's like the birth of a new universe. And so the Big Bang is like our universe emerging out of a black hole. And so then how natural selection comes into this is his idea is that, well, if black holes are how you birth new universes, how a universe births another, then by the laws of natural selection, those universes that are able to optimize the production of black holes and hence like offspring would be more likely to be selected for than those universes which produce fewer black holes and hence fewer offspring. And he actually like goes about falsifying this as well. Like I think some of the testing can't actually be done because we don't have the equipment or something yet, or like the resources for his project. But like for example, I think he gives like one thing I remember is that one prediction is that so that means that our universe should be primed for the production of black holes, because if it's around, then that means like we're one of the optimized universes. And so he says the prediction is if you slightly modify the initial parameters of our universe, like the four forces, quarks and so on, if you slightly modify the initial parameters, then that should radically reduce the production of the future potential to produce black holes. And apparently it does. But yeah, in any case, that's just to say that this is kind of like, I like this because this is, to me, this is like, but taking Bataille up to like the next level where it's the real sex organs are not the sun. Like the universe's sex organs is like when a literal black hole like copulates with itself, like when a universe copulates with itself through its intergalactic sex organs of the black hole. But yeah, so that's taking some process of competitive selection to like not even just the cosmic level, but literally like the multiverse. And
I have to say, I think Bataille would say, Vincent, that's fucking cool. Like
that is, yeah, that's properly Bataillean. And it's like an anthropic principle raised to the power of, I don't know, Omicron or whatever, like the cosmic thrope principle or something. But it's still, there's something in uselessness that I think we capitalize on uselessness. Like we do escape the cosmic churn. We do escape history when we are able to indulge in reading a book. This isn't gonna make me more sexually attractive. This isn't going to give me more money.
You might be wrong about that one.
Advertisement for the book.
But doing the things for the sake of the thing. So I do see it as an means end reversal, like the kind of, but it also, it does, I don't know, it feels like there's a surplus that is unaccounted for in this computation. Like it does seem to be the case that edification and enjoyment, proper enjoyment, not kind of jouissance, none of, but just like I'm having a good time. That honestly to me matters just as much and even more so than history. Like I love speculating about the dawn of time and the end of time and even my own personal legacy. However, what makes me, in my view, who and what I am is the fact that I'm here now having this conversation, and not for history, but for me and for us. And I feel like that can't properly be accounted in a computation or in a competitive ledger.
Yeah, like I think for me, what that excess or like use, in the sense uselessness, like, not saying it's like not valuable to us, but like use in a cosmic sense, like that uselessness is, I think that like it's, in a sense, it can be, maybe there is a kind of qualia element to it that can't actually be kind of explained from this competitive selection transcendental perspective. But I think like it's explicable why it's there in the sense that like because the way competitive selection works is that it's not like everything is always fully all the time like optimized. It's like the way you optimize is by you try out different things. So you actually need like a diversity of things that will turn out not to be successful. You need as much diversity. Like there's a great Nietzsche passage in the notebooks where he's talking about I think it's actually to me it's like the origin of like neo-reactionary like patchwork theory and stuff. But he has this description where he's like, I actually am for socialism, he says. He's like, I'm for socialism I want limited local, like geographically like local limited experiments of socialism so that it can collapse in on itself and prove like how useless it is. And I want that to happen because that can act as we need that to happen because we need that's how it proves itself a failure, and that's how we can, by way of contrast, see what works. And so yeah, I think that and he says at the end, yeah, it's like he's like at the end, in that way, socialism might still prove useful. And so yeah, that's because that's to me what the success is. It's like this stuff that ends up not being useless. It's that you need like let's just say like we don't even have to go to the cosmic level, but just like at the level of like individuals, it's like you need people doing different stuff, like trying out different things, and some of it might not contribute to like be selected for and help optimize the process. But you know, a lot of the stuff that seems like totally useless ends up being so important to the process. Like people that seem so that like can't fit into school or something, and you know don't do well at school, and you know might have like mental health problems or something, and you know seem like neurodivergent from the point of like what's normal, you know, some of those people end up being like Einstein or like you know Elon Musk and stuff like this. So it's like you need just mass experimentation, mass multiplicity, much of which will be useless in order to get for optimization to then filter through that process. So at least that's where, I don't know, that to me is like where uselessness actually proves useful, I guess, and where it's still part of this. It's actually a necessary component of this like ruthlessly optimizing process.
So there's no escaping history, unfortunately, or you know, maybe we can't put a moral judgment on that because it's just a brute fact of it's part of our facticity.
Holiness be my God.
Yeah.
I mean, someone could spend their whole life, or a whole generation could spend their whole existence within one of those useless components, right? Like, if Nietzsche's right that, for example, like socialism is one of those like useless successes that's like you try it out and it fails, you know, someone could live their whole life in that, you know, and never know otherwise. So that's like, yeah, I mean, it's like I think there's the possibility for people to be able to do that. If they wanted to, yeah, but I don't think that's going to be cosmic. That's not going to like be eternal or anything.
Yeah, it's always metabolized back into the long tail of the future.
So, Vincent, I wanted to ask you related to Bataille. Nick has recently been talking about Bataille. He talked to us about him because Elon Musk is trying to develop a very Bataillean technology. He wants to. What did Nick say to us? He's trying to suck on the teat of the sun. Yeah. And I think he said, I think it was Warrior Philosopher. He was like, Musk wants to stream the sun's energy. So this idea of Musk wanting, like, look, if we're gonna fuel AI, these data centers are not gonna do the job. It's gonna take much more than that. I mean, what do you think? Is this the right approach to build this Bataillean technology that can fully harness the accursed share?
Yeah, when I was seeing that that conversation happening, like Elon Musk talking about it, and then Nick and the Warrior Philosopher as well, they all I was thinking was exactly the Leash Molan thing. I was like, guys, we need to like you're thinking too like narrow here. Like we need to be actually trying to maximize the production of black holes. Like that's how, like what's more energy than the sun? It's a universe. And how do you get a universe? You make black holes. So like for me, that's like for me, actually the goal is really the highest possible goal. It's not this, it's not you know, like resource strip the sun. It's not workers' councils. It's like if humanity could produce a black hole, that for me would be, we would have truly served our
Which is
purpose.
it's Barker speaks, right? Where it's spinal catastrophism, geotraumatics. Vincent, I think this whole thing, like black hole production, would have been one if they had known about it. I think you've got a new one that you can run with there. Um, it's fucking cool. Um, yeah. Okay. So look, as far as I love your treatment of this connection between Land and Deleuze and Guattari in the book. The chapter's called Cosmic Capitalism. Um, I think with everything we've talked about so far, this idea that libidinal materialism can be thought of as intelligent materialism or intelligence materialism, how that connects to the Schopenhauerian, in inhuman or impersonal will. Can you tell us a little bit about what Deleuze and Guattari meant by the machinic unconscious and how this concept influenced Nick's work?
Yeah, sure. So for me, Deleuze and Guattari are the decisive, they're definitely the main influence for Nick's shift. And he's to basically his fully formed accelerationist position. Because yeah, I should probably say that the book is like it divided into two parts: the young land and the mature land. After Althusser's distinction between the young and mature Marx, and the mature land, the young land is this period from late 80s to about 1992, where he does seem to be, this is the era where he's critiquing Kant and phenomenology and tracing this alternative history of libidinal materialism, concluding with Bataille. And then also during that period, actually seemingly critiquing capitalism as a kind of fascism, as being on the side of humanism, anthropomorphization, or the the human security system. And then there's from 1993 onwards, at least as I see it, there's like definitely it might be slightly like blurred, the 1992 to 3 works, but I think there's definitely a much more explicit.
I fully agree with that reading. I think that's
Okay, cool,
spot
yeah.
on. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, there's this like full on. Okay, no, actually now capitalism, basically rather than capitalism being on a repression of the noumenal inhuman outside, it is the outside's meltdown of our anthropocentric values and meanings and
That's
traditions.
it. That's what marks this turn. You're right.
Yeah, and that's so that it's with that in 1993 that the mature land emerges, which is the land that we all know and love, or probably a lot of people know and hate. The accelerationist land basically, and that I think the decisive influence for that shift is precisely Deleuze and Guattari. And there's like I guess there's a couple. There's like I think there's 2 ways to explain, to sort of contextualize their influence here, because yes, he certainly, what he takes from them is that they have this appraisal of capitalism's revolutionary deterritorializing dynamics, but of course he also parts ways with their qualifications and caveats that capitalism also re-territorializes, like you were saying before, like capitalism also re-territorializes anew and recodes anew. They say, Deleuze and Guattari say everything returns or recurs: states, nations, families, in
Right.
anti-Oedipus. So it's a complicated relationship. It's mostly love, but nonetheless, yeah, he runs with their appraisal of capitalism's revolutionary remnants, but then wants to reject those caveats and qualifications that it re-territorializes. And I think there's two ways to explain or contextualize that, I think. And one is, the easiest one is probably like a historic, which one that maybe Nick would resist, but it's a historical contextualization. If you just look at the different time periods that Deleuze and Guattari write, Anti-Oedipus in particular, and then Nick's rediscovering their work and reading it in the way he does, because Anti-Oedipus comes out in 1972, so it's like written in the preceding years, late 60s, early 70s. So it's basically written in a global situation of the kind of insurrection that the Young Land wanted, right? Like the 60s counterculture. So you got like May 68 in France, anti-Vietnam War and civil rights movements in the US and elsewhere, Prague Spring in the Eastern Bloc, Cultural Revolution in China, just like widespread insurrectional resistance to capitalist imperialism, fascism, and so on. And then you contrast that with Land reading Deleuze and Guattari in like the early 90s. So after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the rise of neoliberals, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, Deng Xiaoping, but also at the same time, the mass adoption of computers, the home computer, the birth of the World Wide Web, the internet, early breakthroughs in the machine learning paradigm that's still fueling the current AI boom. And so, yeah, it's in this quite different atmosphere of the dot-com boom plus neoliberal, basically total neoliberal hegemony that I think that it's that obviously that historical context can't be ignored when you look at Land, basically his reboot of Deleuze and Guattari with like an OS update of the history of capitalism as an invasion from the future by an AI. So that's like one explanation, I think. Like that's one historical contextualization. But yeah, I guess like maybe there's also like a philosophical, more conceptual one. And yeah, for me, I guess the key, what he takes from Deleuze and Guattari and doesn't is all centered around, of course, their account of capitalism. And so, yeah, I guess what he likes is that they tell us, Deleuze and Guattari tell us that while pre-capitalist regimes organize production around producing the necessary goods and services to reproduce either the tribe or the despot, by contrast, capitalism has this like insatiable appetite for more. And that's because kind of what we were talking about earlier, capitalism is organized around the production of goods and services, not for themselves, for its own sake or to be consumed, but to actually produce more profits. And because there's competition, those profits are reinvested in producing more goods and services to produce even more profits, and so on. And so because capitalism's fundamental driving motor is the production of more capital, it can never rest content with just producing the same old goods and services, as well as the desires and identities and cultures that actually
the old status
come out.
quo.
Yeah, it has to create new goods, new desires, and hence like new identities, new cultures that come packaged with those goods and desires to accumulate more capital. I think like the obvious for me, like the easiest example is always sex. When you're talking about like Land and Deleuze and Guattari, like if you take sex under the pre-capitalist regimes, what Deleuze and Guattari call the primitive and despotic regimes, sex is primarily coded for the purpose of reproducing, let's say something like reproducing or forming marriage alliances to reproduce new labor, basically. By contrast, like under capitalism, sex is decoded. It takes on so many more identities, cultures, social relations, primarily through the sex, cosmetic, and fashion industries, right? Like there's just so many more kinks and fetishes on up the grabs. And so, yeah, I guess the idea is that like in decoding basic functions like sex in that way, as well as just introducing new desires, new identities, new social relations altogether that just did not previously exist. Capitalism is constantly decoding human traditions, conventions, values, beliefs, meanings. It's melting everything solid into air, to put it in the Marx way. And so I think that's what Land takes from Deleuze and Guattari, that what they've in their account of capitalism, what they've shown is that capitalism is more than any militant insurrectionist. Capitalism is the most effective, virulent means of critique, which I think is Land's project. It's like critique of human narcissism, critique of anthropocentrism, because capitalism is just constantly profaning everything we hold sacred into a commodity.
Could you say, because I think this is helpful for the listener, could you say something about, because you use the word transcendental, you use the word critique. Obviously, Kant inspires Land on some level here, right? But also Land is doing his own thing with these terms. Could you kind of clarify the usage of these?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll give like a really simple, short clarification now, but yeah, maybe we should come back to this stuff, the Deleuze and Guattari as well,
Okay.
because yeah, if you want to discuss like Land's conception of critique more as well. But
Okay.
yeah, but basically for the purposes of Land's engagement with Deleuze and Guattari, it's something like the critique of anthropomorphism. Like it's the critique of human narcissism, human hubris in that sense. Or yeah, as you say, in more Kantian terms, it's the critique of dogmatic metaphysics, the critique of misrecognitions of our own inner concepts of reason for the things in themselves, for the world. Yeah, and that's, so the idea is like capitalism achieves that, because everything it holds sacred, every highest human ideal, highest human value, it turns into a commodity. Which is, by being turned into a commodity, doesn't become like the absolute. It doesn't get ingrained in reality. It goes into the for sale basket at the end of the day. So that's I think it's that account of capitalism's virulent critique of everything human, melting everything solid into air, that Land finds so exciting and useful in Deleuze and Guattari. But then, of course, they also, even though they do have this account of capitalism's deterritorializing dynamics, they do say that it also reterritorializes and recodes anew. Everything returns or recurs. Like they say that at the end of the day, capitalism still, at least it requires a minimal state and a minimal heteronormative nuclear-like family to organize social reproduction and economic production. And so it's, at the end of the day, however minimal that state might be, it's still there and it's still recoding. And so yeah, why I think Land he just goes much further than that in his fervor for capitalism than Deleuze and Guattari is because there's that key. Deleuze and Guattari do mention this, but really only in passing. But it's actually kind of like one of their most interesting things that they talk about in Anti-Oedipus, which is just that given that the capitalist corporations, they're competing with each other, they're trying to make more profit, then there's like a general tendency for them to upgrade machinery, improve technology in order so that they can pay workers less, basically. Or they can either, they need less workers, or they can make those workers more productive and pay them the same. So given there's this tendency towards increasing automation due to competitive pressures in capitalism, then the trajectory of capitalism is the supplanting of human labor power by ever more autonomous machines. And that's just like, that's certainly, I think that's not abstract, right? Like, that's just like, you look at the history of capitalism since the Industrial Revolution, And like look at the steam engine or the Jacquard loom in the Industrial Revolution, 19th century Industrial Revolution, and then you look at something like China's like dark factories, like those, like have you seen those videos? Yeah, they're just amazing. Like these entirely, almost entirely automated factories, so that all the lights are out because machines don't need lights to see, so they're kind of dark enlightenment, if you will.
Yeah, right.
But in any case, so Land's just like looking at that history basically, and just saying, well, okay, then the true revolutionary subject of deterritorialization, decoding it's not some anti-capitalist resistance, some post-capitalist resistance. It's just capitalism's own internal dynamism, its own imminent technological innovation. And so then I think you get, so that's like the first component of decisive shift in the mature land, this conception of capitalism is the subject of revolutionary decoding and critique, even more so than what Deleuze and Guattari say, because he wants to emphasize the technological aspect in all of this. And so then because this is kind of like the second like intimately connected component, because of that technological aspect, then the mature land has his other major focus other than capitalism is of course technology. And so he explores all kinds of different technologies and how they seem to be instantiating or materializing the outside, whether that's like the internet, virtual reality, biotechnologies for human enhancement. But of course, the key and technology is AI. And yeah, I mean, and then so he's really just here, maybe less so than Deleuze and Guattari, he's more drawing on, of course, I mean, maybe this is getting to the last chapter that you wanted to talk about as well. He's drawing on cyberpunk science fiction writers like William Gibson, but also real AI researchers like Werner Vinge and I.J. Good. And he's just taking from them that idea that, or their prediction that, again, like what we were saying right at the start, and at some point there are just certain advantages of machinic intelligence over human or biological intelligence, like software and hardware advantages, that just mean things like, requiring less sleep or not needing, to eat and all these kind of things.
They're more efficient.
Yeah, just faster. That just means that at some point, a machine, an intelligent machine, is going to be able to improve itself better than any humans can, and then that improved machine can improve itself even more again and again in that positive feedback loop of recursive self-improvement. Yeah, and I think that's so. And then I guess Land's next. This is where it sort of becomes capitalist technological innovation generating this triggering this singularity becomes the consummation of Land's whole critical project, because then the idea is that if you extrapolate even further than maybe Good and Gibson to a certain extent, then at some point this, or rather maybe not extrapolate, but put it in more Kantian terms, in a Kantian translation, at some point this superintelligence, this recursively self-improving AI is going to just be so much vastly, like the first couple of iterations, the first improvements, maybe it's just as good as our most human geniuses like Einstein or something. But at some point, if it keeps going, it's going to reach a threshold, an echelon of intelligence that's just so vastly beyond anything we can possibly understand. In fact, we could therefore only understand it as precisely like in Kantian terms, a boundary concept. It's precisely, it would appear as the noumena, not necessarily be the noumena, but it would appear like the noumena appears to us. That is precisely as something that we can't experience. It's just like an X, just this noumenal boundary concept beyond anything we can possibly sense or think or imagine. And so why that moment is so important for Land, I think, is because it's therefore this that superintelligence or that singularity that marks the ultimate form of critique of, it marks the ultimate demarcation of the bounds of human reason. It marks the limit where human narcissism, anthropomorphization can no longer stretch. And so that's why I think then it's capitalism, and it's particularly capitalism's constant technological advancement leading to that a real materialization, not a theoretical one, but a real kind of materialization in history of the limit to human narcissism, to human hubris, and therefore the consummation of critique. I think that's why then you get, with that realization, you get the mature land, and everything sort of follows on from that.
That was really good, Vincent. Okay, so related. So, what do you think about the fact that kind of post CCRU, Nick seemed to move away from D&G, or at least away from their terminology? What do you make of his seeming abandonment of at least the terminology of D&G? Because I think the concepts are still there, operating in the background, but yeah.
Did you say post CCRU? So like in the sort of near
Yeah,
reactionary
and like
period?
all the way up to now, even like he just, when we did a little video where we asked him explain the body without organs, and he's like, oh no, like he's like he was he's just like, yeah, I don't really think in these terms anymore, and yet I can't help but see a lasting influence on him, even though he doesn't think in these terms anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think just part of that just might be like, especially maybe even more so than the Xenosystems period. Like if you just, his Gnostic Calvinist turn, his parsifal turn, as I've been calling it, is like, if you look at like something like that, maybe to a certain extent, because yeah, I don't really think like when I had that conversation with him and I was asking him about it, he sort of confirmed my suspicions that it's not like, suddenly land is born again, kind of like in any sort of trad sense. And so let's say, because the subtitle of Thirst for Annihilation is something like virulent atheism, right? Or
Right.
so it's not like, it's less of a break with that than it seems. But yeah, like that might just be that exploration of religion, theology to a certain extent. I mean, this is a very mundane explanation, and maybe you talk about a more like maybe conceptual one, but you just look at any kind of any real philosopher, right? Like kind of like Badiou, like someone like Badiou, or um uh like anyone, Hegel, um and you just like they're basically, I kind of agree with the Heidegger thing that most philosophers really just have like one idea,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just sort of applied or explored or filtered through many different, so they come up with like an idea, like in philosophy, like in the register of philosophical language and discourse, and then they like explore what does this idea do in different fields
Wouldn't
like
you agree?
art.
This is what Nick has done ever since with Capitalism is AI.
Yeah, and it's like, like you look at Badiou, like Badiou has, oh yeah, Heidegger, Hegel, but yeah, Badiou, he's got his like 3 big volumes of pure philosophy, and
Mm-hmm.
then he's got a book about art, a book about love, books about politics, book about cinema, book about religion, Saint
But
Paul,
they're all
and
about
it's
the
like,
event. Yeah.
yeah, like you read them, and it's not really like it's like, oh, he's just doing something so that's like completely independent when he's talking about Saint Paul, his book about Saint Paul. I mean, it's most egregious. Like there's I think there's like a shoddy version of doing this where I think Laruelle kind of goes in this direction a little bit, where sometimes you read his books about other fields like religion or whatever, and it's almost just like he doesn't really do much of the translation. It's more just he's just reproducing the philosophical just account over and over again, and it becomes a bit monotonous. But yeah, nonetheless, all of that just to say that, yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's doing. It's like with he's just now he's just reading kind of like theological texts, and he's just um, articulating basically, yeah, something that he's a conceptual framework, accelerationist framework, if you will, that he's held since the 90s.
So, what's interesting is you in the book talking about neuromancer and cyber gothic and all this. And I know what the 7th chapter is, even though it's not there, which is it would go into the CCRU. And so I kind of want to ask you, all right, Vincent, you write this book, you go through the 2 main periods of his work, you go through the different stations, but doing Kant and prohibition of incest and then libidinal materialism. We go into D&G. We get into, there's the critique of, Heidegger and phenomenologists early on. How do lemurs come to be part of this story? Is it the cyber gothic? Like that's the way I kind of read it. Is like the cyber gothic points the way in a sense. But at some point he starts reading the occult, and this whole pandemonium matrix comes into the equation. And I always ask, and it's weird. He doesn't want to really affirm it either way. I think it makes sense to say the lemurs are artificial intelligences. They're AIs, and they're the hyperstitional realization of these ancient myths about entities and the old ones and all that. And yet, somewhere along the way, it's like they're not just hyperstitional entities for him. I think the Gnostic Calvinism is the fact that he believes in these entities. How does this connect AI as capitalism to machinic unconscious to deterritorialization? It seems to come out of left field. If somebody's reading Nick's work and it's like, okay, I've read Nick's work, time to go to the CCRU writings, and then they're confronted with the lemurs.
That's a great question. I'm actually teaching right now at the moment this course at the Melbourne School of Continental Philosophy on the CCRU, and we're right in where it's a 12-week course, and we're right in the middle of the weeks on occultism. So this has been very much front and center for me lately. But yeah, so I do sort of think that I think maybe Nick himself made this analogy that to Newton, where you've got Newton's theory of gravity, his physics, Newtonian physics, and then actually most of the time Newton was reading the Bible and thinking that he was getting messages from God and so on. And at least from Nick maybe thinks they're more inextricable than, but at least most people in terms of like Newton biographers and so on would just say that there's some kind, this is just like, these are independent. Like there's historical reasons why he's at this sort of like historical threshold of modernity. And so he has this like religious tradition, but then he's also moving towards the scientific and the new. And so he's just this kind of, so he's able to do these two kind of explore these two independent intellectual traditions. But, and yeah, sometimes I think about it, I like that in terms of Land's philosophy and then his engagement with the occult, in the sense that, like, I don't think you can get something like the numogram or any of these numbering practices from a transcendental methodology. And I take the philosophy to be a Kantian transcendental methodology. And I don't think you can, from those axioms, those transcendental axioms, I don't think you can actually derive the numogram. And I don't think that's how I don't think Nick has said that's not how the numogram is not, it doesn't arise as a like philosophical move or something.
Right.
It arises out of out of arithmetic, basically. And I think that's actually true. Like, I would say that maybe to answer your question a bit more directly, maybe the bridge is something like to me, I guess what I've been saying in these classes on the occultism a couple of weeks ago, that for me, the thing that unifies, the most possibly unifying thing for all of the CCIU's different numbering practices, whether that's the numogram or alphanumeric Kabbalah or subdecadence, it's that they're all interested in exploring what happens when you introduce zero, the number zero, into traditional numbering systems that have traditionally excluded zero. Like, I think that's what they're about. And so obviously then there's a reason why they're interested in zero in the first place. Like, Sadie has a book called Zeros and Ones.
Mm-hmm.
Nick talks about, zero is immense. It has cultural, historical, intellectual associations with nothingness.
It's there in D&G, 0 degree intensity, and
yeah, it's just the most based, like, both in a literal sense and slang sense. It's the most based of all the numbers. Like, it's just historically it has been, at least in the West, it was resisted. Its entry was resisted for a long time into Western numerical systems. Aristotle's dictum, nature abhors a vacuum, is probably, I mean, that's not technically zero, but it's like, I think that encapsulates an ancient Western repulsion towards nothingness with which zero is associated. And so then instead you get like Neoplatonism, where everything comes out of the one. The one is at the origin, not zero. And you see, I think this is also why, incidentally, why this CCIU were interested in the Y2K phenomenon in particular, because what was going on there was that because computing dating systems in computers would only use the last two digits, when the year 2000 hit, that means 99 date on 1999 represented as 99 on computing systems would appear as 00. And so this could lead to the fear was this could lead to various malfunctions, glitches, and in more extreme anxieties about it, maybe like some kind of techno-apocalypse. And so I think what's interesting about that for the CCIU is that Y2K is basically restaging the original trauma that was zero entering Western numerical systems. It's like a restaging of that. But yeah, okay, so all of that just to say that, so there are various kind of cultural, intellectual backdrops here for why the CCIU would be interested in zero. But then I think that's quite different so that's quite different than to how you actually get the numogram in a way. For example, like because the numogram this is a question that kept coming up in class the other week, where basically so far we've just gone through the numogram. So we had a blank page and then went from scratch and just like built the numogram out of the various arithmetic operations. And a question kept arising that, like, well, actually, do they actually believe in this, like this numogram, like, or is it like a joke? And
did you go into unbelief?
Like, well, it's like it actually doesn't require any belief. It's like, does 2 + 2 = 4 require belief? No, that's just like a mathematical operation you can perform. And so the reason I say that is that the numogram, there's reasons why they might be interested in, as I say, plugging zero into numerical systems. But then once you make that first move, all of the numogram is completely derived out of very basic, almost childlike arithmetic. It's not derived out of, like, I mean, like, if we just go through some of it, like, quickly, right? Like, like, so the first move basically is just, this is where the interest in zero comes in. The first choice is like, okay, traditional decimal system, base system goes from 1 to 10. 0 is excluded from that. What if we go from 0 to 9? And that gets you the 10 zones of the numogram. And okay, the choice to go from 0 to 9, that's a choice. That's probably informed by their philosophical interest in 0 and so on. So sure. But that's also just like a mathematical operation, like choosing a decimal system. So you choose 0 to 9, gives you the 10 zones. And then the next move is like, okay, what happens if we just perform another very basic arithmetic operation like pairing? That's just a common mathematical operation. And how do we pair them? Let's pair them like the highest to the lowest. So 9 goes with 0, 8 with 1, 7 with 2, and so on. And so that gives you the 5 syzygies or 5 pairs of 2. Again, that's just derived out of like a arithmetic operation. And then you go, okay, let's splitting the difference, like differentiation. That's again just like a basic arithmetic. What is the difference between two numbers? Like, what is the difference between 9 and 0? 9. So we'll diagram this out. Let's diagram this out. So 9 and 0 we'll draw an arrow and it goes back to 9. And that gets you do that for all of the pairs, and that gives you like the currents. And then finally, the last two like really basic kind of arithmetic procedures you can do. What if we then take the triangular number of each of the 10 zones, and then you digitally reduce that, and then we diagram that out. We just draw like another arrow, and that gets you like the channels and the gates, right? So yeah, so then all of that to say is that if you do that, if you just choose 0 to 9 base decimal system, pair them up from the highest to the lowest, do the difference between each of the pairs, and then triangulate each of the 10 numbers and digitally reduce them, and you diagram that out, you get the numogram. You get those 10 zones, you get how they're paired up, you get why the currents are pointing in certain ways, and you get why the channels are pointing in certain directions, and why they're numbered with certain gates as the triangular numbers. And so all that, like, the reason why I say that is just because the numogram doesn't require any belief. Like, it's not, that's what it emerges out of just those basic arithmetic operations and diagramming them. Like, it doesn't emerge because, for example, it's not because, let's say with the pairs, right? Like 0 to, let's take the first pair, 0 to 9. It's not like the CCOU were like, okay, we have this pre-commitment because of our cultural, intellectual, philosophical interests and traditions. For some reason, whatever reason that might be, 0 and 9 are connected to us. Like, they're connected. It's as if, like, imagine Deleuze and Guattari, for some reason, they talk about 0 and 9 being connected or whatever. And so we're like, we have this pre-existing, largely arbitrary philosophical commitment to connecting 0 and 9. They're meaningful to us. And so we need to therefore find some kind of arithmetic operation that will connect those numbers. And so they search through everything and they find, okay, well, we can pair them. And why would they be connected if we pair the highest with the lowest? So 9 go with 0. And you'd also have to choose firstly, you'd have to choose, okay, we'll choose a 10 base decimal system because 0 and 9 are in that. And then how do we get them paired? Okay, we'll pair them with the highest and the lowest, and then 0 and 9 are connected. It's not like that's how the syzygies are formed, because of some pre-commitment to 0 and 9 being connected. Because then you'd have to explain why is 8 and 1 connected and 7 and 2 and so on. And it's the same thing with I'm trying to think of so like 6, take the zone 6, right? The triangular number of 6 is 21. So 2 plus 1 is 3, and so 6 and 6 goes to 3 through the 21st gate. Okay, like it's not as if like the numbers 6, 21, and 3, like it's not as if the CCU have a pre-commitment that these 3 numbers are connected, again, because of in some philosophy we read or in our cultural tradition that we've inherited, those numbers are connected. And so again, we want to find an arithmetic operation that will connect them and like force that meaning. And so the way we do this is that we, okay, well, so the triangular number of 6 is 21. If we digitally reduce 21, 2 plus 1 becomes 3. And so, yes, then we're going to go with triangulation and then digitally reducing the triangular number. And then that gets us the connection. Because then it's like, okay, well, how do you explain then the fact that you have to explain why all the other triangular numbers of all the other zones, and then if you digitally reduce them, why those 3 numbers are connected for each of them. So that, I just say that because, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm like making much sense, but I guess I'm saying is that that's not how the numogram is derived. It's not derived from a pre-commitment to certain numbers being connected because of like history, because of historical traditions. It's derived literally just from 0 to 9 base decimal system, pair them up, highest to the lowest, and split the difference between each of the pairs, triangulate each zone and digitally reduce it. And if you diagram that out, you get the numogram. You don't have to have any, that's why I say it's like 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's like, you don't have to believe or be committed to any cultural tradition. It's just like, that diagram emerges out if you map out those arithmetic operations. And then after that, you might find that there are certain connections with your historical, cultural, mathematical, theological, Kabbalistic traditions, like the way that the zones of the time circuit happen to correspond to the iron law of doubling or the I Ching. It's like, oh, they seem to map on. That's interesting. But it's not as if they were like, oh, we want to build like a tree of life that maps on the I Ching. So we're going to have to perform all of these operations, like rather than just see what happens out of them, we're going to just hunt down all of these arithmetic operations so that the middle part of the time circuit of our tree of life therefore corresponds to what we wanted to correspond to the I Ching. It's like, no, that connection emerges after the fact by chance, but not by the intention of the CCIU. I don't know if this is making much sense, but that's...
Let me ask you, so when Nick kind of, all of this kind of started to coalesce, alphanumeric Kabbalah comes into it, all that. I mean, how do you feel, Vincent? I mean, these incredible coinky dinks where they didn't know the cybernetic culture research unit totals to 666, right? And then in all of these things, it totals to 333, 666. Are there some where you're just like, there is a moment where you're like, okay, this is spooky. It's hard to explain some of this, or how do you feel about this dimension? Because it's so important to Nick. Like, he always is doing this. So do you see this? Do you see like why this is so core to his thinking?
I mean, I think it's core to his thinking in terms of, because I do think that there can be, like, even if he doesn't see it like this, I think there is that Newtonian split between the 2 Newtons and the 2 Nicks, in the sense that all of this follows from all of the occult stuff follows from performing those initial arithmetic operations that gets you the numogram. All of the accelerationist philosophy follows from using a transcendental epistemology or epistemological method. And and then I think you can there are sort of, like with the I Ching, there are connections between the two. There are parts that can map onto each other, but I think they are different axiomatic systems in a way.
Like, you don't think the numogram is at the heart of capitalism is artificial intelligence?
No, because I think, I don't know if Nick would either, in the sense that, because that's not how like the numogram is derived. The numogram
it's not also, it's also how he didn't arrive at his core thesis through the occult. He was already there with that.
Yeah, I think that emerges out of basically a development of the history of transcendental philosophy, or libidinal materialism, the capitalism as AI thesis. And then on the other hand, the occultism emerges out of these like arithmetic processes. Yeah, but in terms of the...
But you see, here's the thing. I think the issue is, for a lot of people, I mean, it was for me, but it seems like, okay, we're doing this transcendental thing, we're doing capitalism, we're doing AI, and then this thing with the lemurs and the numogram is just here, and it's kind of difficult to figure out how does this, is there a systematic unity to all this, or I think that's where Nance, you got something.
I don't want to derail, but I think I do want to interject and say I do think they're necessarily connected. I do think that, I mean, ultimately, Gödel and Cantor went mad. He thought he was speaking to the ghost of Francis Bacon, and Cantor, I think, maybe didn't explicitly surface in CCRU and Nick's work until later, and kind of diagonalism. You have Hilbert over here talking about hotels, and then Cantor comes along and says, I'll do you one better. You can take your little hotels and modify them. And then we have even more different types of infinity. But I do think there's something in like quantity, like when quantity becomes the primary mode of recognition. Not to say that, oh yeah, qualia and blah, 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 and mystical stuff, but I do stand firm on the fact that like there is a surplus that is never integrated, because we present a radical break with nature. And so you can just call it a defect or a dysfunction of our interpretation, our hermeneutic, blah, 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 whatever. But I do stand firm that when we try to interpret things as they are, when we try to access the thing in itself, number, when we try to take number as this like ontotheological, metaphysical truth, substance, we go mad. So I do think that seeing intelligence as bare intelligence, bare raw matter, the raw potential in matter, and seeing that as the paragon of what we can do as humans, and seeing quantity as the language of absolute cardinality. You have ultimately intelligence runs on quantity. Line goes up. Why does competition matter? Why does efficiency and optimization matter? Ultimately, it's quantity. You can get more quantity. So I think that there is a necessary connection, and I think it's a type of madness, and not to. I'm mad in my own way. We all have our own personal madnesses, and I do think they make us what we are, and that's what makes us special to each other. But I do think that this number madness is a necessary component of recognizing that, holy shit, capital is the fabric of space and time itself. Like, I think in order to see that, you do have to be a little mad. But maybe not. Maybe that's me being a little too romantic.
No, that's really interesting. I guess for me, the part where they maybe Nick's solo work, and then, or not just his solo work, but let's say his philosophy, and then his interest in the occult, where they do bridge is that, because I don't think it's at the origin of the numogram, in the sense that it's just derived from these arithmetic operations and diagrammed out. Because at this point, because I guess like the way this has been, that's all we've done in this class. I'm teaching on this at the moment, that we've just we've diagrammed out the numogram and performed these arithmetic procedures. And there's a lot of sort of anticipatory questions like, oh, but like, well, what does this part mean? And like, what does this part mean? It's like, we're not, that's not like, that would be, we're not up to the point where we're like mapping any meaning onto this. Like, it's just, there's at this point, there's not really any meaning. It's just like, this is just what you get out of these mathematical procedures. But then when meaning does start to get mapped on it, is through these other numbering practices, like subdecadence, like particularly, I guess, alphanumeric Kabbalah. And here, this is where conceptual symbolic meaning is getting, because then if you're doing the Kabbalistic move of, okay, let's take phrases in words, phrases, sentences, let's, crunch them through various gematria, let's say AQ, and get these numerical sequences, and then we can compare these phrases that have a similar numerical sequence, or maybe these numerical sequences already, like 666 or 333, already have a pre-committed meaning to us in our cultural tradition, like 666 obviously does. That's when conceptual meaning starts getting mapped onto it. And I think it's there where Nick's much more easily able to just then interpret that through the accelerationist philosophy. Yeah. But again, even with alphanumeric Kabbalah, I think it's also again that move of, to your point of the emphasis on like the numerical here, that it's again basically what happens when you alphanumeric Kabbalah is basically what happens when you again introduce zero into a traditional numbering system, namely traditional Kabbalah, where it's not been before, or in that way before. So it does come back to this invasion of zero into numerical systems.
I'll admit, like, I'm always tempted to just say to Nick, all right, Nick, how does summoning a lemur accelerate the process? Like, trying to bend the two into some consistent whole. I know he's not a fan of unity, but
no, there's definitely, because there's a difference between these procedures that derive the numogram, and then we're going to call certain pairs of numbers or something Lemurian demons, or actually now we're going to call them angels, apparently.
Or even lofty powers.
Yeah, so there's like interpretation. There is like, at that point, I think those things that I'm saying are not at the origin of the numogram, like pre-commitments to certain cultural, philosophical lineages, mathematical, theological lineages. I think at that point they start coming in, and that's where it can be much more easily bridged with his philosophy. But yeah, before that, I guess like one other thing I would say though is, because I am interested. I don't mean to say this to, like, I am interested in AQ, and these coincidences are remarkable. The numogram is really interesting. It is weird that you do derive it precisely not out of a cultural commitment. You derive it from these arithmetic procedures, and then somehow the time circuit corresponds to the I Ching. That is really fascinating.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think what makes it fascinating is that at the origin of it isn't a desire to connect these kinds of things. It's actually just playing around with numbers. And then that's what makes it surprising in the first place. Like, and that's what makes the connections so bizarre. Like if you were trying to make those connections in the first place,
couldn't
then
do it.
And it also just wouldn't be, that would just be pure philosophy. That wouldn't be the occult. But yeah, the one other thing I'd say is that, I think it was last year, you guys would have seen this on X, someone found out that in AQ, Nick Land is retarded equals 333.
We saw, like, I'm like, should we do a wellness check on Nick? Is he okay?
Well, because I actually think that is, like, as I say, I think I'm much more interested in exploring and developing the consequences of the philosophical system.
So are we. We're with you. Yeah.
And I'm interested in exploring, like I'm teaching it at the moment. I think it's fascinating, like the occult system as well. And I do think they can be explored independently of each other. But yeah, that just like, I guess on that Nick Land is retarded equals 333 AQ. For me, that is my interpretation of that is like, that is actually maybe the best confirmation, the most plausible confirmation of alphanumeric Kabbalah that's ever happened. Because that's
okay. Why?
Like, my interpretation of that is like my interpretation of that is like, the classic interpretation is like, oh, Nick thinks AQ is like, it's all these messages from the angels or whatever, the lemurs, because like tree of good and evil from Milton is equal 666, or dark enlightenment equals 333 or whatever it does. But then at the end of the day, you just haven't looked hard enough. Nick Land is retarded equals 333. But actually, I think that is the message from the angels. And because what that message is telling us is that, yeah, he's just like a human, he's the human slag, right? He's just like another monkey slave, right? Like, you don't listen to him, listen to us. Like, he's retarded. Like, he's not the lofty power, but just look at like the messages. Like, this tells us that he didn't create this system. He stumbled upon it. But you don't need him. Like, he's human or too human. Listen to us. I think
And to be fair,
just look at the numbers.
And Nick would go for that.
Yeah, to be fair, that's his line. He has maintained that, it was a gift, and he claims no ownership or no influence even. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, Vincent, do you have time? A couple closing questions real quick. Well, I don't know how quick, but we'll see. I just wanted to ask, really wanted to ask you a couple more things. One is, okay, so Land and Negarestani. I'm curious about what you think about Reza's intelligence and spirit and how that relates to Nick's work. Reza, a couple months ago, wrote a really, kind of knockdown, drag out critique of Nick called Rational Inhumanism versus Landian Anti-Philosophy. So I guess the question is just Land versus Negarestani. What's all that about? I know, big quick question.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
it's a big question, and I think actually at some point let's definitely talk about it like right now. But yeah, I think at some point we should have another
because
conversation.
I already tell you we want to
yeah.
talk to you again, so we would let's
Okay.
definitely talk again.
Yeah, because like I actually have written this other book, which hopefully come out next year, which is much more on. It's actually that my essay in Machine Decision is Not Final is like a sort of tiny excerpt from this book, which is pitting. It's like pitting. It's a critique of the AI safetyist and the neo-rationalists, particularly Reza and Nick Bostrom.
Okay.
And then in favor of then developing a more
And just so you know,
Nietzschean-
we plan on. Oh, I've got X. I grabbed X. There it is. Hold on. There it is. Okay. We've been planning. We're gonna do some more readings from that one, and we're planning on doing an exegesis of your essay in there.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see what you guys think of that, because it's also touching on, I know you've talked to Nick about, because that book is based, I mean, that essay is coming for like orthogonality and trying to develop like a non-orthogonal account of intelligence. So yeah, which I think Nietzsche offers basically. But yeah, definitely interested to see what you guys think of that. But yeah, in terms of,
well, look, since this is a bigger question, maybe the thing is, do you think there's just a core fundamental disagreement between the two?
yeah, there's definitely a disagreement. It's probably fundamental. I guess for me, what I would say.
Oh, wait, hold on, you muted.
Oh. Your audio dropped out.
Wait.
I think you're
You're back.
Yeah, sorry, I think.
Oh, you're going again.
Okay.
Pause.
The fucking lemurs did it again.
The fucking lemurs did it again. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks a lot,
We have
Caddick.
been in. Yeah, it's Yukatuk. Who was it? The Y2K one? Was it Yukatuk?
There's different ways
it's
of writing.
Yaddick.
I don't have the.
It's
secret
Yaddick,
of
right? Yeah. Yeah,
Yatuk
the Y2K.
something.
Yatuk. Yeah. Damn lemurs. Always coming in here and messing stuff up.
Hey, can you hear me again?
Yeah, you're good.
Yes.
Sorry, they were just connecting to my girlfriend AirPods.
All right.
Okay, yeah.
No.
So I don't know if Nick would agree with this, but there's something, because obviously I'm more on Nick's side in this, right? Like Reza had a brief bit where he comes to me in that essay you mentioned.
Right.
And yeah, I've sort of feuded with him on Twitter a fair bit before. But yeah, I actually, even just as a theoretical nemesis, I massively respect Reza. Like to me, that's why this other book is like so much of it is dedicated to him. And to me, he is Intelligence and Spirit. His book is our phenomenology of spirit. Like he is a 21st century Hegel. And I mean that both as the highest compliment, but also the highest possible backhanded.
Sure.
Yes. But in any case,
If there's one philosopher Nick hates, it's very clear it's Hegel.
Yeah. But having despite my disagreements with him, and as I say, I don't know if Nick would follow me here. There's actually, like, I actually agree with a certain localized version of neo-rationalism more generally. Particularly, I'm most familiar with Reza's neo-rationalism, but from what I've read of Ray Brazier and Peter Wolfendale and Thomas Moynihan and others as well, Patricia Reed. But yeah, that's just to say that I definitely hold that, or I'm definitely suspicious of conceptions of the human that see the human as just completely devoid of any essence or fixed qualities. Like the most egregious version of this is probably existentialism, right? Where the essence of the human is just its essencelessness. It's just it has this absolute freedom to just shape and reshape itself forever anew. Yeah, so yeah, I'm very, and that's also not to say that humans don't have substantial plasticity. Like we have a vast plasticity in terms of changing, in terms of what our natures can do, values, goals we can pursue, and all this kind of thing. It's just to say that I do think there are certain universal and necessary conditions of possibility for what makes a human.
There's a material substrate.
Yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's the material substrate though. Funnily enough, this is where the neo-rationalism comes in. But but there are. I would be committed to saying that there are some like transcendental conditions of possibility for what makes a human, and therefore that just what distinguishes a human from things that are not human. So if there are things that don't have those, aren't grounded in those conditions of possibility, then they're not human. And I think this is like a and yeah, in terms of as for what those conditions are, I actually agree with the neo-rationalists here, more or less, that particularly resonant Garastani's account in Intelligence and Spirit, but also analytic pragmatist philosophers like Robert Brandom, that obviously the neo-rationalists are very influenced by. I agree with them that where they basically hold, and this is like somewhat simplifying it, but that the conditions of possibility for what makes a human are sociality and semantics. The fact that human intelligence is grounded in a community of rational language-using agents, playing the game of giving and asking for reasons, the dialectical game of giving and asking for reasons with each other. That's what human intelligence is. And yeah, so its conditions of possibility are sociality and semantics, basically sociosemantics. So I basically would accept that more or less as a approximately adequate account of human intelligence. But where I would part, and I don't know if Nick would or not, I'm not sure. But I at least would want to concede that much ground to the neo-rationalists. But where I want to part ways, and this is where obviously the more accelerationist, unconscious id in me is just like screaming and trying to break out, is that I reject the neo-rationalist caveat that sociosemantics is not just the necessary and universal conditions for the human, but for any and all possible general intelligences. Whether that's a human in the sense of being, in your sense, Nance, of being a material substrate of like a biological body and brain, or whether sociosemantics can be instantiated by artificial neural nets or something like that. Now they want to say that sociosemantics is the condition of possibility just for any and all possible general intelligences.
So
and
the
I would
idea
reject
is
that.
spirit grounds intelligence.
Yeah. And I would want to reject that because for me, the key counterexample to that is capitalism again, right? Capitalism, to the extent we treat it as a intelligence, because this goes back to the socialist calculation debate we were talking about. Capitalism does not, as an intelligence, it does not demonstrate truth claims or generate its values or pursue goals and drives through Socratic dialogue, right? Through playing the dialectical game of giving and asking for reasons. Like capitalism doesn't work through a community, a Politburo of language using agents, throwing out inferences and updating them, as is the neo-rationalist account of general intelligence. It operates through, it does demonstrate truths, it does generate values, it does pursue goals and drives. So it is an intelligence, but it does it through a blind, a much more blind, non-rational process of competition, basically, through competitive selection. And so when I'm critiquing the neo-rats, I'm critiquing them to the extent that they want to conflate sociosemantics with just what general intelligence is. Whereas I want to say, actually, I think that's pretty adequate account of human intelligence, but it's precisely would be an anthropomorphization or metaphysics to think that human intelligence and its sociosemantics exhausts what general intelligence can do. And it's not just theoretically, but because we are literally living next to or inside of an intelligence that doesn't work like that, namely capitalism.
All right. Well, Vincent, I think this is probably a good place to stop. We've got more questions, but we'll save them for the next time we get to have a conversation with you. This has been great. Thank you so much. Everybody, go order a copy of Vincent's book, Unknown Lands. Again, go to, it's Index Press, is it .com? Is that right?
Index-press.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just an amazing book on and a systematic introduction to the work of Nick Land. You can't get a better one. This is highest recommendation. So, Vincent, it's been great. Thank you so much. Come back anytime. We'd love to pick your brain on so many more things related to Land, Negarestani, AI, the future. And thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a total blast. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm really glad you both like the book. And let's do this again.
Heck yeah.
Hopefully in the near future.
Yeah.
All right.